Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Teach Middle East podcast. On today's episode, I'm talking sustainability with the principal of the Arbor School, Dubai, Brett Girven, and we're going to be examining some of the topics around sustainability. I doubt we will be able to exhaust it and even do it the justice it deserves. I know I certainly can't, but he certainly will be able to give us, from a school leader's perspective, what schools should be doing, what they are doing, and what responsibilities they bear in preparing the next generation as sustainable citizens. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you very much, Leisa. Great to be here and lovely to chat.
Thank you. Would you mind doing a little introduction of yourself for us, please?
Absolutely. Brett Girven. So I'm the principal here at the Arbor School, and I joined a few years back. So we're only 4 years old, and I've been here. Well, this is my third year in the school. Hopefully you can slightly tell now. I'm a New Zealander by birth. I grew up in New Zealand. I grew up on the beaches and in the ocean and walking the forest and playing on the sports field and enjoying everything that New Zealand had to offer, which I guess led me down the path that I went in terms of where I studied. So I studied zoology. With my original intent was actually marine science, because I surfed and fished and loved everything about the ocean. But I went into zoology, and then I realized I actually connected with ecology more than the specifics of zoology. And I liked the fact that you could consider humans as a part of that system. I liked the system's nature, the connectivity, the idea that there are utopian decisions to conserve or maintain wildlife and our natural environment, but always we do have to consider humans as a part of that system. So I studied environmental science, got into teaching, taught in New Zealand, taught in the UK, taught in Saudi Arabia, started getting into the leadership side of education. And then, serendipity reached out, I guess, is when I was here in Dubai at another school in the leadership team, and the chance to take a lead role in a, inverted commas, green school here in Dubai came up, and I jumped at it. And it's just a wonderful chance to have gone full circle and really now put my skill set into play. And so it's been a fabulous 3 years here at Arbor, and things seem to be going well for us in the school. So try and keep that going.
I like the fact that you started off doing environmental studies and then ended up as the principal of a green school in a desert. that the irony cannot be lost on you.
I know, isn't it strange? And I'm not that fatalistic. Some people say, well, it was meant to be. Maybe it was meant to be, but for me, it's, I guess, you develop a skill set and you continually reach out and you build networks and you're reaching into the unknown. So eventually it came to be because I guess I put myself in a position for it to be. And so I like to think that I've built that skill set in that pathway, and eventually it existed. So there is an irony in it. I absolutely understand that, a green school in the desert. So that's why I said initially it's an inverted commas. It's green in the sense as it's about ecology. It's an ecological school, but it's ecological in the broadest definition of ecology, if we wanted to dive into that at some stage, rather than just saying it's about plants and animals, because there's an ecology of a desert as much as there's an ecology of a tropical forest. Ecology doesn't mean plants and animals. It's got a much more diverse meaning, and that's how we interpret it here at the Arbor School.
So that leads me nicely into tell us a little bit more about the Arbor School. What makes it unique? I remember seeing the domes around and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Tell us a little bit more.
It is. Well, it is. It's an exciting school. It's such an exciting school. And I'm sorry, I informally say it's a cool school. It's a really cool school. We have a blast. I certainly have a blast. So the founders, I guess, of our school is a paleoclimatologist, incredibly clever man who, as well as being a family businessman, wanted to bring a school here. And so they had to bring a certain kind of school. And it wasn't just sort of looking for a gap in the market and saying, oh, there's no biodome schools, let's throw a biodome up. It was actually a deeper underpinning philosophy about what education could be. And it's an eco-sophy, it's a green philosophy, I guess, if you want to think of it simply. So the idea that, we're not conquistadors, we're collaborators, we're not consumers, we're here to help conserve. the route to happiness isn't through more consuming, it's through frugality, and da da da. So there's an underpinning philosophy, and so when you accept that philosophy, you say, well, actually, there's not a real distinction between nature and non-nature. These are boundaries that we put in as humans, and our sort of more recent history has actually separated us from. Because if you look at every indigenous culture, they don't have a separation between nature and spirit and science. It doesn't exist. So this is actually a very Western worldview. So the idea now is if we are in an anthropocentric position as a world where humans are at the middle, well, actually the worldview that we had for a long part of our history was ecocentric, where the environment was at the center.
Yes.
So when you build all that together, you say, how do we build a school that allows us to manifest that for the kids? And so then the domes become a place where we can bring nature to the children. The gardens become a place where we can bring our children to nature. And why nature? Again, it's not a zoo. It's not about plants and animals. It's this understanding of connections. So ecology isn't the study of plants and animals. It's the study of connections between plants and animals and their living and non-living environment. And so if we can understand systems, so ecology is actually about connections, and ecoliteracy, which is what we teach, is about systems literacy. If we can understand systems and connections, then hopefully we can think really in more complex ways to start connecting the dots to solve our big challenges. So, we could look at COVID's a terribly good example. We could look at COVID as a medical disaster, which it is, but also there's a transport issue, and there's an equity issue, and then there's a, where did it come from issue, and then there's a cultural issue. So these are all systemic problems that aren't solvable just by solving one little silo, one little bit. And so if that's an example, then that's what we're aiming for, children that are thinking in systems connected ways, as opposed to discrete bits of knowledge that are learned and never applied within an authentic context.
I like that. And I like that whole eco-literacy. Can you tell me a little bit more of what that looks like, how that is applied in the school? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis with the curriculum and the teaching and learning at Arbor, having that whole eco-literacy interwoven in everything you do?
So I know, I suppose I have this conversation with parents when they come in, so I'm reasonably well practiced, I think. But so we're an ecological school founded on the national curriculum. So national curriculum, the British curriculum, gives us our what, the standards, the statements. This is what you do at year one. This is what you do at year two. So the what's quite clear for us at our school. The how then becomes really important, because the how has to be experiential. It has to be authentic. It has to be transdisciplinary in order to meet our why. We're sitting between those two things, right? And the why then becomes sustainability and eco-literacy. So what does that look like for the youngest ones? Because, a 4-year-old's not really interested in the concept of systems, but they might be interested in connectivity. How do plants and animals connect? How does parent animals connect with their baby animals? How do mums and dads and families connect? So we can look at different ways of connections and systems and simplistic views. So then we say, okay, go to the gardens. Sorry, I'm pointing to my left because there's a garden. And it's not necessarily about systems, it's about experience. So engage with nature. Go for a walk through the trees. Use your 5 senses. If you go to the dome, you see the pond. And yes, it's experiential and you're gaining all that information. But at the same time, that pond is a system. It's a sun feeds the algae, or provides energy to the algae feed the fish feed the terrapins. It's a system. Systems have rules. So the next stage of children, we could take them there and say, hey, what might happen if you added 3 more terrapins? And the kids start thinking, or maybe they run out of space, or maybe they make too much waste. Next age of children, you could say, well, hey, look, we decided before that there's rules to this system. Do those same rules apply elsewhere? Could we apply it to poultry farm? Do they have limits? Is there constraints? Is there boundaries? And so that layering upon layering upon layering is what we're aiming for. And it's aspirational, because it's not easy and it's not done in many places. So there's still a lot of learning for our educators, although we have some fantastic educators. Some are further down that journey than others. And of course, having a background in ecology doesn't hurt. I've sort of got a head start on that, but it's a tricky journey. So it's experiential, child-led, play-based, curiosity-driven for the youngest ones. And we try and maintain that journey of curiosity as they go through the school, but just layer on complexities of those activities. So it goes more from being sort of what they're doing every day to trying to being a sort of separate more biological, geographical subject in the secondary school, where now they have ecoliteracy as a subject and they do inquiries and big questions. And the rest of the teaching is still focused, you're still doing English, you're still doing math, you're still doing geography, but how do we deliver that in a way that pays homage to who we want to be?
And who do you want to be as a school?
Oh, goodness, that's a great question. I have to admit, we know where we want to be, but I'm changing day to day, because what I see the world changing, and in terms of the narrative of education, is changing so rapidly. So I want to be a school that not produces, that sounds like a factory, where children develop
Nurture
into young adults that are the relentless questioners. They understand how to think in systems, and they go to wherever it is they wish their destiny to be, and whether that's an apprenticeship, Harvard, into design, or to become a protester standing on the street corner yelling for climate change. Any of those things would be a great outcome for me, as long as that child had a really good pathway and a fantastic time whilst they were here, and became these really highly literate, eco-literate students.
Yeah. So that ecoliteracy, how do you then spin that off to not just be a within the Arbor School thing, but
Yes.
also a community thing? Because that's how it's got to spread, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And actually, so our vision is enough for all forever, right, which is essentially a definition of sustainability. But we will never achieve as a school enough for all forever. That's a global outlook. So we'll do our bit for enough for all forever. And I want to produce, again, these children who have been exposed to lots of opportunities to think about enough for all forever. But you can't be sustainable in isolation. It doesn't work. I can't say in these four walls of my school we're sustainable. It's impossible, because we have so many inputs and outputs that you have to actually be sustainable as a community. So I like to use that word. So I say we have to be sustainable as a community. We will not actually achieve our vision if I don't reach out to our community. So most of the research would actually show, whilst we can, I can teach eco-literacy, kids actually change very, very quickly. They'll become eco-warriors overnight, but most of their intention to act, their actual, whether they actually do take action, their values, that actually comes from home. A lot of it comes from home. So what do we do to try and achieve that? So it's trying to bring families into a meaningful, a real community. So saying, this is your school, come and join us for yoga. We offer family yoga in the morning. So I don't think there's a charge. I think it's free, because it's the idea is this is your community. Come and use it. If you want to recycle, bring your things here to recycle. If we haven't got back onto composting since COVID sort of hit, but we hope to do composting. We have a cafe that mums and dads can come and share. And if we have an abundance of vegetables, we'll put it in there. Or if the chef bakes bread, and she does bake bread, we put it in there for families to share. So the idea is that I want a community that is joined to us, not because I love people tweeting us or putting us on Instagram, but the reality is, put it on Instagram or don't put it on Instagram, I could care less. Come and join us because you want to be part of this community. And yeah. I guess we started as a new school where people joined us somewhat because of who we are, but mostly, I guess, because of price and proximity. New schools getting off the ground, whereas now our demographic is certainly moving towards people who come because of who we are and less because of where we are.
Yeah, I like the fact that you're starting to do programs that bring the community in, and I do wonder about your student population. Are you attracting? And you did mention it. You've attracted people, of course, when you start out because of proximity. This is the school closest to home, but now your message is going out there, and people are understanding your ethos and the vision that you have. So, who are the types of students that you are now attracting?
That's a great question. I mean, diverse, like super diverse. I think we have, 55, 60 nationalities on site at the moment. We're a British curriculum school, so our biggest group are British passport holders, and then it's just super diverse after that. Families, particularly that are joining us in the lower school, are coming because they really love what we're doing in terms of the curiosity approach, the hands-on approach, the holistic approach. And it's not, we want, there's no escaping literacy, numeracy, being really literate, being great communicators, being exposed to the best of science and what's been thought and said and done through history. But at the same time, having a blast and making sure our kids are smiling and happy and safe and well. And so that holistic approach is really attracting families. and no offense to any of my colleagues out there in other schools, but some schools, their approach is really driven and they really want high attainment, and they make no bones about it, and that's where they're headed. And some families join those schools and they think, this is not us. We would like a different approach. It's not that if you come here, you get less English or less maths. It's the what is clear for us. The what in our school is the same as what you're covering in a British curriculum school in Hong Kong or a school in downtown London. It's the how. And so families that like our how come to us. It's hard to, could I describe a family? No, we've got loads of German families and Turkish families and Portuguese families and Indian nationality families and Arab nationality families. They're just good people.
Yeah, I just wondered what sort of values they shared, how it is
right.
when you've got a sustainable school or one that is more ecological in its approach. You wondered if it attracted people with a certain value system.
I think it does. I definitely think it does. We are attracting our share of greenies now, and people that that want to join into our vegan menu, and people that ride to school, and people that really love what we're doing in terms of sustainability and want to get involved more and more. So I think, as I say, we're attracting people now because of who we are, not just where we are.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me nicely into why you think other schools ought to really start to think about sustainability in a real way, and how they're helping their students to understand the need for us all to become more sustainable citizens of this earth.
Yeah. Schools are fabulous places, but they're busy places, as you know, and to say yes to something means to say no to something else. So everyone has a list of priorities. It's just how high it sits. Teachers, children, schools, they love to think about sustainability. It's just how high can we push it up on that priority list? For us, it's super high. My reasoning would be all education is environmental education. Okay, there is no resource that you're using, looking at or talking about that doesn't come from the environment. There is no economy without the environment that we have.
True.
There is no question that things are limited and scarce. I mean, these are not up for discussion. We know that we can reduce or reverse greenhouse warming. The science is there. What we need is to move from the knowing to the doing, and that gap is real. And if we took climate change, and I know there's been arguments around it, I think that's sort of lessening now, but this is not a time for, let's just slow down before we get to the edge of the cliff. We are 2 front wheels off the edge of the cliff. It has backed the bus up before this is irreparable. And I mean, climate change is only one thing. Ocean acidification and, lack of fossil fuels and resource use is going crazy. So without getting too dismal about it, there are 101 reasons why this is not even optional to discuss. It is critical. It is fundamental to be discussed. How we do it is really important, because you can put into that equation learned helplessness. If I say now, let's all go and fix climate change because look at this big disaster, it puts the locus of control too far away from what children can actually do. And if they start to feel helpless, that they can't actually make a change, then they learn their helplessness and eventually they throw up their hands and say, I'm not going to bother. So actually, we take an approach where there's no disasters before age 10. So, it's not about disasters. It's about what things can we actually do in a positive sense. So my advice to other schools would be to think about that. Don't throw disasters up on the screen in front of the kids, because they'll straight away think, well, that's a disaster. We can't fix that. We want to go beyond that. We want to say, okay, here's something we can control, which is affecting me in this place here where I am. And let's take a step towards that. Let's think beyond green in terms of the greenwashing. It's great to turn off taps. It's great to have a light switcher in your class. It's great to recycle. Those things are all good. But where can you make a significant difference to the ecological footprint of your school? Well, maybe it's in transport to school. Maybe we mentioned before, it's in provision of uniforms. Maybe it's in how we move our staff to school. Maybe it's in turning down the AC by 1 degree at nighttime. All of those might be better steps than spending a lot of time convincing people to turn off the tap, even though turning off the tap's not a bad thing, particularly here.
Yeah, it definitely is. I liked something you said earlier, the green ethos and the fact that it's working towards enough for all forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to think of the UAE, and I'm thinking about Dubai, and I'm thinking about the surplus. Unless it's, I don't know, not everyone has a surplus, but a lot of the people I know have a lot more than they need. And a lot of the children, including my own children, are exposed to a lot more than they need to be exposed to. They have a lot more than they actually need to have. If I think about how I was raised, I had far less than they had, and I was perfectly happy. How do we get children to understand that ethos of enough for all forever in a consumer-driven society that we currently live in?
Yeah, it's tricky. Like they said, I'm the same with my children. It drives me insane sometimes. And also, I think we memories are really crystal clear. We remember how great we were at being sustainable back in our day. Because I don't necessarily think that's the truth for me. I can think of some horrible days when I threw trash everywhere and did things that I didn't realize had an impact because I just didn't know it. But how can we do it? I guess the first thing as parents, particularly if you get to this point of sort of eco anxiety, first thing is to give yourself a break, because we all have to live in this world, and simply being in Dubai is more environmentally is worse for the environment than not being in Dubai, because this is a place that's energy expensive, but it is consumptive just being here. So hey, look, we've made a choice to be here, and there's a reason for it. So let's live with that decision, give ourselves a break. The second thing is, I always say, wanting to change the world doesn't stop you from living in it. So I need to drive a car. Doesn't mean I don't need to drive this kind of car, or if I'm going to drive this kind of car, maybe I'm going to try and then be green in other ways. So give yourself a little bit of a break there. Living in this world doesn't stop you from wanting to improve it. And then just think of small steps. So for our children here in the school, it's about understanding connections. It's then thinking about what we could do for the environment, and then it's actually taking a step, because the number one thing you could do is actually do something, because otherwise we keep educating and we keep putting this knowledge action or knowledge value gap, and it just stays there. So we know that we shouldn't be doing this, and we continue doing it. So what is it that you can do to close that gap on? Just choose one thing, close the gap. I know that, let's take an easy one, we shouldn't be using single-use plastic bags. Get rid of it. I know that my shrink wrap that goes around my sandwiches just goes straight in the bin. What could I use instead? I could use wax paper or baking paper. That would be a tiny thing, but it will make you feel better, and you've made a step. So if you could close the knowing doing gap on one thing, you move to the next step, and then you close it for the next thing, and over time, I think that's what will happen. What I do think, to be fair to people, is that we won't get the rate of change that we require without federal level intervention. This has to happen from a government level. It has to be rules that say this is not okay. Either you will teach sustainable education and we will not do these things, or I'm going to force companies to not do these things or to absorb the cost of doing these things, et cetera, et cetera. I think to get the kind of speed that we need in terms of speed of change, there's going to be federal level intervention, whether it comes sooner or later. But we need to take those steps as well, because we can't wait.
Yeah, I agree with you, and makes me wonder, the fact that we can't wait, the fact that we know that there is definitely a climate emergency, as you've described it, the bus is halfway over the cliff.
Yeah.
And I know that schools, once they have something on their plate, something else has got to be cleaned off their plate.
Exactly.
But why do you think they're not paying the attention that is needed? I find schools, and I'm speaking from my experience, having gone into several schools and spoken to several school leaders, I find that this is not on their list. It really isn't. And not only that, why is there only one Arbor School?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's other schools with a sustainable focus. That's probably, there is one Arbor School. I'm going to claim that, but there are other sustainable schools around.
I do know. Yes,
green lens.
there is.
Yeah. So that's there, and we're not alone on this earth.
I can only think of one more, Fair Green. Can't think of another.
I guess if we talked about the concept of green, yes, but if you talk about the idea of curious, project-based, the kind of authentic learning that I'm saying will change people's mind more than just the green bit. I'm sure we could find other schools that are doing their bit towards that. So remember, this is a sort of a head, heart, and hands transformation. This is not just a dress your room up with some hessian and brown sticks because people care more about the environment. This is a transformative education.
This is what I'm talking about. Where are the schools that are doing it in a real way?
Okay, I'll say few and far between. So for
Why
us, we
is
stepped
that?
up. Was yeah, that's a good point. This is an existential crisis that is coming slowly until it's not. You know, I mean, COVID hit, and it hit hard, and it was there in your face, like that bus literally barreling down at you. But I mean, this slow creep of global warming or ocean acidification, or these are slow creepers, and so people don't tend to move until it's late, and that's unfortunate, but it's the reality of where we are. So again, if you have federal level intervention, sure, then we'll get rapid movement. But a truly ecocentric worldview puts participants at the center of it. It doesn't outsource our actions to experts in the government. It says it's local, it's regenerative. It says, you and I are speaking because it's mutually, it creates a mutual benefit to both of us. So our partnerships that we build aren't because I want someone else to shout about us. It's because me being with you is better for both of us. And so a truly ecocentric view takes away all this competition. It puts collaboration at the center and says, let's go forward together. So I think that's the ultimate aim of all this. Along with the side of that, we're going to need some intervention. So where are the schools? I don't know. Everyone just has different priorities. I mean, Dubai is a really unique mix, isn't it? Where private schools have stepped in to fill the role of what a government would do in other countries. And I mean, we know that education is a socio-political tool used by governments everywhere. And so if a government wants to educate a certain way, they'll say, go forth and do this.
Yes.
So, I mean, the UK government threw out education for sustainability years back. Now it's slowly coming back. It's features in I think, I have to get it right. I think it features in the Welsh curriculum. I think it features in the Scottish curriculum, but it doesn't feature in the UK national curriculum. There's no sustainable education in there. Why on earth would that be? So I think that's, there's moves
didn't serve the political argument at the time. But now, we're going to have the climate conference. So, of course, we have to put it back. Sorry, I don't mean to be controversial. But
No, I kind of agree. I didn't even think of that in terms of it coming back. But it needs to come back just because it needs to come back. Whether the climate conference happens or not is irrelevant. But it needs to be there just because it's intrinsically a good thing. So who gets to decide what knowledge is the good stuff? Has been a socio-political tool for a long time, right? And so that argument continues forever. So do we teach... I don't know, do we teach maths? Of course we teach maths. Numeracy is really, really important. To what level is numeracy important before it becomes a specialist, esoteric skill? I don't know. And that's probably beyond my remit. But I know, and to me and to us, ecoliteracy, sustainability, and this ecocentric worldview is such a funky, cool, purposeful North Star that I adore it. I'm changed. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. It's hard to go back. Drives my wife crazy, and I think families that join us do the same. So
yeah, you know what it is though, when you think of sustainability and you think of eco living, you almost think of hippie lifestyle, when it really isn't. It's really all our responsibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I always think, well, how if I sent my child to an eco school, so to speak, am I going to be termed as one of those kind of out there kind of parent who wants my child to run around barefoot and play with trees all day?
But don't you?
What's wrong with that?
Exactly. Where's the downside? If you did that and learned English and learned the language and had a blast and were good at maths? Like, where's the downside?
I know.
So what's the opposite? Think of that. Okay,
sitting in a tie and
right. As I said, burning electricity. Right. So the opposite is unthinkable. So so why are we still subscribing to the opposite? Again, I don't want to get into this false dichotomy of knowledge versus skills versus competencies and We know there's pedagogy is the science and art. So we're sort of saying the what and the science is quite clear. Let's just think about the how. So there's an art to that. So I'm the same again as you, Leisa, because I want my children to be involved in all sorts of sports and arts and and be great communicators and all these things. But at the same time, I see what the children do here, and I think that's just fabulous. Let's have more of it.
Yeah, definitely. So if you were to give a message to fellow school leaders who are listening to the Teach Middle East podcast, and you wanted them to do just one thing in their school to become more ecological, to really help the school to move in that direction, what would that one thing be?
Sustainable or ecological? I'm sorry to be
Sustainable,
pedantic.
sorry.
Sustainable. Yeah, let's go with sustainable, because ecological is slightly different.
Yeah.
Sustainable, I guess,
sorry.
would be an audit. I think you would start with an audit. You said, okay, what are we going to do? Let's do an audit. So you would audit, and there's lots of different templates you could use and access, just Googling. Where are we the most or the least sustainable? Is it use of resources? Is it the movement of people? Is it our electrical bills? There's lots of data that you can access, and we do lots of self-evaluation in terms of teaching, learning, safety, all those things. If you just added another standard to the self-evaluation, teachers, school leaders will be strangling me now when they say put more into our self-evaluation form. But if you had something there about sustainability, what do you know about your school in terms of whether you're serving the purpose of sustainability? That would be a first step. And so, the other thing too is kids love it. Kids adore it. Ask them to go and find where the most electricity is being used and give them some data and give them an authentic hand them the DEWA bill. This data is at the school's fingertips. AC temperatures, average temperature of classes, how often are the children going outside? And we're probably luckier than some in terms of access and things like that. So I get it. It's not equal across every school, but an audit, first of all. And then secondly would be, I guess, if you wanted to try and think about how do you make your classes more connected to nature, would be think about that on beyond Hessian and twigs and sticks. So do you have an understory in your class that is designed for children to fiddle with loose parts? Do you have a canopy level where you can sort of see the best qualities of work? Is there unimpeded access to light and the outdoors? Do you have things all over your windows that obscure the outdoors? So you could audit your classrooms and see whether they have some level of connectivity to nature, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a very good place to start, because unless you do that audit, you're really just kind of battling around in the dark, really, aren't you?
Be just sort of polishing what may or may not be there.
Yeah, brilliant. We're kind of winding down, so I'm gonna pretend I'm some kind of education genie. Mm-hmm. I'm not, but if I were, what would you say would be your greatest wish for education moving forward? Please don't say pandemic. I really don't want to hear that word anymore. But moving forward in education, what would be your greatest wish?
Most genies give 3 wishes. I only get 1. Goodness gracious.
Okay, I'm not going to be mean. Have 2 wishes, Brett. You can
2 wishes. I have to figure those out now. I would like schools to have a head, hands, and heart approach to transforming the children that we have. It takes away the false dichotomies of exams versus learning versus knowing versus skills. Take all of those away, because we as educators, I think, are all here to try and transform the children into the best version of what we want it to be. So if we take away those false dichotomies, then we take away the competition, then we're okay. Yeah. So number 1. And I guess the second one, I scribbled some notes here, so I'm just sort of looking, is I want, and I'm not there yet, but I want to get to a point where we have these regenerative leadership styles that are mutually life affirming, I guess, where what's good for one is good for all. And so we're inclusive by very nature. We are regenerative. We as a school mimic an ecosystem. We're diverse. We're resilient in our diversity. We are emergent. We have lots of emerging properties that are better because we're together. I know that this is a big, hairy, audacious goal now, but it is a school where the system mimics an ecosystem in all its variability. With
all that synergy and working together and that connectedness. Absolutely. I like that. Yeah. I like that. Thank you so much.
So lots of people think of nature as this sort of red-toothed, clawed beast fighting survival of the fittest. And actually, Darwin's theory of evolution or theory of natural selection sort of led us that path. But actually, there's other theories that say things don't survive best by competition. They survive best through collaboration. There's some readings around that are really exciting to think, well, hey, Darwin did say, there's a theory of natural selection and survival of the fittest, but that's not the only way they do it. And so collaboration is actually as important as competition, if not more so.
Yeah, that's a good place to end the podcast, don't you think?
I think so.
Thank you so much for being my guest, Brett. It was really enlightening talking to you. I know I have ideas of running around barefoot and learning, but I think, you know, I miss that. I grew up in the Caribbean part of my life where,
Right.
you know, the ocean and nature was just a part of who we are as a people. And so I do miss that for my kids, and a school like yours that's trying to bring that connectedness with nature is definitely commendable. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I haven't this year been out barefoot, but I did get convinced last year. It doesn't take much to convince me, to be fair, but to get my feet off and run around the grass, get my shoes off, sorry, run around the grass. Yeah, best part of the day.
Thank you. Thank you for being my guest.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.